Battle of Britain 1940 aircraft, tactics and numbers. Before we examine the aircraft, the tactics and the numbers of the Battle of Britain, it is worth pausing on a few details that tend not to appear in the popular accounts. Details that are, however, well documented, and that add texture to a story which mythology has sometimes simplified. So Hurricanes outnumbered, Spitfires 2-1. The aircraft most associated with the Battle of Britain in popular memory is the Spitfire. The aircraft that flew the majority of the sorties, destroyed the majority of the German aircraft, and equipped the majority of fighter command squadrons, was the Hawker Hurricane. By the RAF's own records, Hurricanes outnumbered Spitfires by approximately 2-1 in fighter command when the battle began. The Hurricane equipped 32 squadrons. The Spitfire, 1902, 1 in 5 pilots was not British. The RAF Roll of Honour for the Battle of Britain recognizes 595 non-British pilots out of a total of 2,936, approximately 20% of those who flew at least one authorized operational sortie. They came from Poland, Czechoslovakia, New Zealand, Canada, Australia, South Africa, Rhodesia, Belgium, France, and even from the neutral United States and Ireland. 2 of the 4 group commanders, Air Vice Marshal Keith Park of 11 Group and Air Vice Marshal Sir Quintin Brand of 10 Group, were from New Zealand and South Africa respectively. The Bf-109 had only 10 to 15 minutes of combat time over southern England. The Messerschmitt Bf-109E had a total endurance of less than 90 minutes. Flying from airfields in northern France, a Bf-109 pilot had little more than 10 to 15 minutes of fuel available for actual combat before needing to turn for home. This constraint, documented in period German operational records and subsequent analysis, severely limited the fighters' ability to escort bombers to their targets and return, a limitation that became especially acute once German attacks shifted to London, which lay at the extreme edge of the aircraft's effective range. The Spitfire's engine cut out in a dive, and a woman fixed it. The Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, fitted to both the Spitfire and the Hurricane, used a float-type carburetor. When a pilot pushed the nose down abruptly, a standard combat maneuver, negative G-forces caused fuel to flood away from the engine, causing it to cut out. The German Bf-109's Daimler-Benz DB601 engine used direct fuel injection and suffered no such problem. German pilots could dive away from an attacker. British pilots could not reliably follow. The solution was devised by Beatrice Shilling, an engineer at the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough. Her device, a small brass thimble-shaped flow restrictor. Officially, the RA restrictor was fitted to all fighter command aircraft by March 1941. RAF pilots nicknamed it Miss Shilling's Orifice. Hydro 5. The Luftwaffe stopped attacking radar stations, a decision Goering himself recorded as a mistake. Chain-home radar stations were attacked by the Luftwaffe in August 1940. Only one, Ventnor on the Isle of Wight, was put out of action for any significant period. On 15th August 1940, Goering himself wrote in an operational directive, "It is doubtful whether there is any point in continuing attacks on radar sites, in view of the fact that not one of those attacked so far has been put out of action." He then ordered the attacks on radar stations discontinued. This decision, documented in the RAF Museum's analysis of the battle, allowed the chain home network to remain operational throughout the campaign. The Luftwaffe was consistently wrong about how many RAF fighters remained. In early August 1940, Dowding's staff estimated that the RAF had no more than 400 to 500 serviceable fighters. On 9th August, Fighter Command had 715 aircraft ready to fly and a further 424 in storage available within 24 hours. The Luftwaffe's consistent overestimation of its own kill claims and underestimation of British production rates led its leadership to believe repeatedly that Fighter Command was on the verge of collapse when it was not. The IWM notes that on 31st August, Fighter Command suffered its worst single day of the battle. Yet the Luftwaffe, believing the RAF was already broken, shifted its attacks away from airfields on 7 September. The RAF formation tactics were widely criticized as dangerous, including by the Germans. British fighter squadrons flew in tight V formations of 3 aircraft, known as VICs. These formations, designed to maximize concentrated firepower, reduced pilots' ability to scan for threats and limited maneuverability. German pilots referred to them as Idiotenreihen, rows of idiots. The German Schwarm formation, 2 pairs of fighters spread wide, allowing all 4 pilots to monitor different sectors, was tactically superior. By the end of the battle, a number of experienced RAF pilots had begun adopting the Schwarm approach informally. 8 RAF barrage balloons brought down 3 times as many RAF aircraft as Luftwaffe. The barrage balloon network, hydrogen-filled balloons tethered at altitude to force enemy bombers higher, was part of the Dowding system's layered defense. However, according to IWM Duxford tour guide John Lewis, whose account is cited in the IWM's official Dowding system documentary, 3 times as many RAF aircraft struck barrage balloon cables and were lost as Luftwaffe aircraft. Dowding, nonetheless, considered the balloons a worthwhile deterrent against low-level bombing attacks. Britain produced twice as many aircraft as Germany in 1940. Aircraft production figures for 1940 show Britain producing approximately 10,000 aircraft against Germany's 8,000. During the Battle of Britain specifically, British fighter production consistently outpaced the Luftwaffe's ability to replace losses. The Blitz Wikipedia article, drawing on contemporary production records, notes that British fighter aircraft production continued at a rate surpassing Germany's during the Battle of Britain. By 2 to 110, the night bombing of London began because German crews got lost. On the night of 24th August 1940, a small group of Heinkel He-111 bombers dropped their bombs on civilian areas of London. The World History Encyclopedia notes that civilian centres were mistaken for nearby military targets. Churchill ordered a retaliatory bombing of Berlin on 25 August. Hitler, who had assured the German public that Berlin was safe from British attack, was furious and ordered the Luftwaffe to shift its attacks from RAF airfields to London and other British cities. This shift, which began on 7 September 1940, relieved pressure on Fighter Command at a critical moment. By the end of June 1940, Germany had defeated France, the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. The British Expeditionary Force had evacuated approximately 340,000 men from Dunkirk, but had left behind the tanks and heavy weapons they could not bring by sea. Britain stood alone. Adolf Hitler had expected the British government to seek a negotiated peace after the fall of France. When that did not happen, he ordered his armed forces to prepare for an amphibious and airborne invasion of Britain, codenamed Operation Sea Lion, or Unternehmen Seelower. In a directive issued on 16th of July 1940, the German Navy set the earliest possible date as 15th of September 1940. For the invasion to have any realistic prospect of success, Germany needed to control the airspace over the English Channel and southern England. The German Navy's surface fleet was far weaker than the Royal Navy. Without air superiority to protect the invasion fleet from British naval and air attack, Operation Sea Lion was not viable. Hermann Göring, Commander-in-Chief of the Luftwaffe, reportedly told Hitler that his air force could destroy the RAF and establish air superiority without the need for invasion, and that he could accomplish this within 4 days of good weather. Hitler Directive Number 16, 16th July 1940, orders preparation of Operation Sea Lion. Göring's boast claimed he could destroy fighter command within days. No source has located a precise transcript, but the claim is reported in multiple official histories. German Navy's minimum preparation time to September 15th, 1940, which would then depend on weather and air superiority being achieved first. The Luftwaffe's strength available for the campaign was substantial. According to the Quartermaster General's numbers for 29th of June 1940, cited by the Battle of Britain historical timeline, the Luftwaffe had 4,074 aircraft available across all categories, including 107 single-seat fighters, 357 twin-engine fighters, 380 medium bombers, 428 dive bombers, and 569 reconnaissance aircraft. These were organized into 3 Luftflotten, air fleets, positioned in Norway and Denmark under Luftflotte 5, in the Low Countries and northeastern France under Luftflotte 2, and in northwestern France under Luftflotte 3. Against them, Fighter Command on 1st July 1940 had 1,963 available aircraft in total, including 754 single-seat fighters. The frontline fighter strength available on any given day varied considerably and was almost always lower than this figure, as not every aircraft was serviceable at the same time. Encyclopedia Britannica puts the British frontline fighter strength at slightly more than 600 for practical operational purposes, against approximately 900 German single-engine fighters and 300 twin-engine fighters available for offensive sorties. Fighter Command was organized into 4 groups covering different geographic areas. The most important was 11 Group under Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, covering London and the southeast, the area that bore the brunt of the German assault throughout the battle. Luftwaffe total 4 Kommandosen mit 4 aircraft, all types. June 29th, 1940. RAF Fighter Command 754. Single-seat fighters on 1st July 1940. British frontline fighter figure for practical purposes, 600 pluses. German single-engine fighters, 900. Twin-engine to 300. 11 Group, London South East under Air Vice Marshal Keith Park, the Hawker Hurricane. The Hurricane was the RAF's most numerous fighter in 1940, equipping 32 squadrons against the Spitfire's 19. It had been designed by Sidney Cam of Hawker Aircraft in the early 1930s and was powered, like the Spitfire, by the Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. Its construction retained elements of older practice. Much of the fuselage was fabric-covered rather than all metal, which had two practical consequences. It was easier and faster to build than the Spitfire, and damaged fabric could be repaired in the field within hours. Its wide, stable undercarriage also made it easier to land on rough grass airfields. German cannon fire tended to pass cleanly through the fabric structure without always causing catastrophic damage, in contrast to the more destructive effect on metal-skinned aircraft. The Hurricane's top speed was lower than that of the Bf-109. It was generally assigned to attack the German bomber formations, which it could engage more effectively, while the faster Spitfires were directed at the German fighter escort. This was a tactical generalization that did not always hold in practice. The chaos of aerial combat rarely allowed such clean separation, but it reflected the relative performance of the aircraft. The Supermarine Spitfire, the Spitfire Mki, designed by Reginald Mitchell and powered by the Rolls-Royce Merlin III, had a maximum speed of approximately 355 miles per hour at 18,500 feet, marginally faster than the Bf-109E's 348 mph at 17,500 feet, though both figures varied with equipment load and conditions. Its elliptical wing gave it a tighter turning circle than the Bf-109, allowing it to outmaneuver the German fighter in horizontal turns. Its principal technical weakness, as noted in the lesser-known facts section, was the float-type carburetor of the Merlin engine, which caused the engine to cut out under negative G-forces. The Bf-109's Daimler-Benz DB601, equipped with direct fuel injection since 1937, had no such limitation. Beatrice Shilling's ray restrictor corrected this problem, but only reached all of Fighter Command's aircraft by March 1941. After the battle was over, the Spitfire carried 8 303-inch Browning machine guns. These were effective against unarmored targets, but had less destructive power against armored German aircraft than the 20mm cannon fitted to the Bf-109 E3 and E4 variants. Several Spitfires were experimentally fitted with Hispano 20mm cannon during the battle, but the guns jammed repeatedly under combat conditions, and the variant was not successful in 1940. The Messerschmitt Bf-109, the Bf-109, August known to its pilots as the Emil, was the Luftwaffe's primary frontline fighter. By August 1940, 23 Gruppen were equipped with the type. Its DB601 engine gave it the fuel injection advantage already discussed. Its armament, on the E3 and E4 variants, included 2 cowl-mounted 7.92-meter machine guns and 2 wing-mounted 20mm MGFF cannon, giving it considerably greater destructive power per hit than the .303 caliber machine guns of the Hurricane and Spitfire. The Bf-109 could carry enough ammunition for 55 seconds of total firing, machine guns and cannon combined, somewhat more than its RAF counterparts. Its leading-edge slats automatically deployed before a stall, aiding low-speed control but they also made tight-turn combat maneuvers more difficult by deploying unevenly. Its critical limitation was range. With an endurance of less than 90 minutes, the Bf-109 had approximately 10 to 15 minutes of combat time over southern England. Pilots operating over London, the furthest targets, were at the absolute limit of their fuel. This meant that German bombers on their return journey were frequently without fighter escort, leaving them vulnerable to RAF interception. The limitation was widely understood by Luftwaffe pilots and is documented in German operational records cited in subsequent historical analyses. The German bombers, the Luftwaffe's medium bomber force, consisted primarily of the Heinkel He-111, the Dornier Doe-17, and the Junkers Ju-88. These were conventional twin-engine designs, carrying bomb loads of between 1 and 2 tons over ranges adequate to reach most of Britain from French and Norwegian airfields. They were, however, designed for the close air support role that the Luftwaffe had developed in the campaigns in Poland and France, not for independent strategic bombing of a defended industrial nation. The Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bomber, which had been devastating in the close support role against ground forces with limited air defense, proved highly vulnerable to modern fighter attack when unescorted. It was withdrawn from the main battle after suffering heavy losses in mid-August 1940. The Messerschmitt Bf-110, a twin-engine heavy fighter intended to provide long-range escort, was too slow and insufficiently maneuverable to protect itself against Hurricanes and Spitfires. It too was gradually withdrawn from the escort role, requiring fighter cover of its own. Hurricane Squadrons 32, Spitfire Squadrons 19, source RAF and Wikipedia, citing Overy, Spitfire Michaeli max speed 355 Mepsch at 18 to 500, Bf-109E 348 B Lepsch at 17 to 500. Bf-109 endurance, less than 90 minutes total. Combat time over southern England, 10-15 mini. Bf-109 cannon, E3-E4, 20 meters MGFF. Greater destructive power than 303. Browning, Stuka withdrawn from main battle, mid-August 1940, after heavy losses. If one factor can be identified as providing Britain's most decisive structural advantage in 1940, it is the integrated air defense system that is referred to as the Dowding system, named for Air Chief Marshal Sir Hugh Dowding, Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command from 1936. The Imperial War Museum describes it as the world's first wide-area, ground-controlled interception network and the most advanced air defense network of the time. The system brought together 4 components. The first was the Chain Home Radar Network, a series of stations along the south and east coasts of Britain capable of detecting incoming aircraft up to 80 miles away. The chain home stations used a fixed broad-beam transmission system rather than the rotating aerial of modern radar. They could not track aircraft once they crossed inland, and they had difficulty detecting low-flying aircraft. These limitations were partly addressed by a supplementary network of chain-home low stations, which used rotating aerials to detect aircraft flying below 1,000 feet. The second component was the Royal Observer Corps, 30,000 men and women in approximately 1,000 observation posts across the country, tracking incoming aircraft visually and by sound once they had crossed the coast. The IWM's John Lewis, a Duxford tour guide whose account forms part of the museum's official documentation, describes the Observer Corps as the unsung heroes of the Battle of Britain, noting that while radar told the system that aircraft were coming, the Observer Corps told it where they were going. Information from Chain Home and the Observer Corps was passed by telephone to the filter room at Fighter Command Headquarters at Bentley Priory in North London. There it was assessed, confirmed, and distributed to group operations rooms, where it was plotted on large maps. Group controllers could then direct individual squadrons and sectors to intercept incoming raids. At peak efficiency, by the end of the battle, interception rates of over 90% were being achieved, with some raids being met with 100% interception. That is, every aircraft in the raid was intercepted. Winston Churchill, writing in his memoirs, assessed the system directly. All the ascendancy of the Hurricanes and Spitfires would have been fruitless but for this system which had been devised and built before the war. Winston Churchill. The Second World War, Volume 2, the critical operational consequence of the Dowding system was that Fighter Command could, in effect, act as if it had twice as many aircraft. Without the system, squadrons would have needed to fly constant standing patrols, exhausting pilots and aircraft, burning fuel, and still likely missing incoming raids. With the system, squadrons took off only when a raid had been positively identified and a vector calculated. The Wikipedia article on the Dowding system, citing operational research records, notes that in numerical terms, it was as if Fighter Command had over twice as many fighters, giving them effective parity with the Luftwaffe. Chain Home detection range. Up to 80 miles, RAF-1, up to 200 miles for some stations. RAF-4 notes up to 320 km under optimal conditions. Observer Corps strength, 30,000 personnel in 1,000 posts. Filter room at Fighter Command, HQ, Bentley Priory, North London. Interception rates by end of battle exceeding 90%. Some raids 100%. Goering's directive. 15th August 1940 halts attacks on radar stations, calling them ineffective. Phase 1. Kanalkampf. Channel battles. July 10th, August 12, the battle officially began. By RAF reckoning, on 10th of July 1940, when the Luftwaffe intensified its attacks on British coastal convoys and ports in the English Channel. The German aim was twofold: to cut British overseas supply lines and to force the RAF into combat over the Channel, where downed British pilots would be lost even if they survived, unable to fight again. The RAF was obliged to fly standing patrols to protect convoys, which placed significant strain on pilots and aircraft. The Admiralty eventually cancelled all daytime Channel convoys, removing the tactical rationale for these engagements. Phase 2. Adlertag and the attack on airfields. August 13, September 6 und 13 August Adlertag, Eagle Day. The Luftwaffe launched Operation Eagle Attack, its main offensive aimed at destroying Fighter Command. The initial attacks were directed at RAF airfields, radar stations, and aircraft factories. On that day, the Luftwaffe flew 1,485 sorties. German intelligence, however, was poor. Many airfields attacked were misidentified as fighter command bases when they belonged to coastal or bomber command. Approximately 15 RAF fighters were destroyed, while the Luftwaffe lost 39 aircraft. On 15th August, subsequently known as the Greatest Day, the Luftwaffe deployed all three air fleets simultaneously for the first time, flying more than 2,000 sorties. Luftflotte 5 attacked from Norway and Denmark, expecting to find the north of England undefended. It was met by fighter command squadrons and lost heavily, never being deployed in force again during the battle. Total German losses that day were 76 aircraft. The RAF lost 35. Through the final weeks of August and the first week of September, the Luftwaffe concentrated its attacks on 11 group sector airfields in southeast England. Biggin Hill was attacked repeatedly and heavily damaged. The RAF's pilot shortage became acute. Aircraft production was running at approximately 300 aircraft per week, but only 200 pilots were trained in the same period. On 31st August, Fighter Command suffered its worst single day of the entire battle. Phase 3, the shift to London, September 7th onwards. On 7th September 1940, the Luftwaffe sent approximately 300 bombers to London, the first mass daylight attack on the capital. The RAF had been expecting another attack on its airfields and was initially positioned to defend them. Nearly 1,000 German aircraft crossed the Channel that day. The Docklands area of East London was heavily bombed. According to the IWM Blitz fact sheet, 430 Londoners were killed and 1,600 injured on what became known as Black Saturday. 41 German aircraft were shot down for a loss of 25 RAF fighters. This shift, ordered by Hitler in response to the RAF's bombing of Berlin, was the pivotal German strategic error of the campaign. It relieved pressure on Fighter Command sector airfields at the precise moment when that pressure was becoming unsustainable. Air and Space Forces magazine, in its analysis of the battle, states directly, that took the pressure off Fighter Command at a critical time. RAF fighter losses fell below the output of replacements. Phase 4, Battle of Britain Day and the German withdrawal. September 1515. September 1940 is commemorated as Battle of Britain Day, the climax of the daylight phase. The Luftwaffe launched its largest and most concentrated daylight assault on London, hoping to force a decisive confrontation and establish whether Fighter Command still existed as a viable force. It did. The German raids were met with the full strength of both 11 Group and 12 Group. German losses that day, according to the Battle of Britain historical timeline, were the heaviest of the month. 56 German aircraft were destroyed, a figure that became 185 in British newspaper reports at the time. The actual figure is established from later records. 2 days later, on 17th September, Hitler postponed Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The Luftwaffe shifted its focus to night bombing, the Blitz, which continued until May 1941. The daylight battle was over. Adler Tag, Eagle Day, 13 August 185 Luftwaffe sorties. German losses 39, RAF losses 15. 15th August, Greatest Day. Luftwaffe 76 aircraft lost. RAF 35 lost. First and last use of Luftflotte 5. 31st August, Fighter Command's worst single day of the battle. 7 September, Black Saturday. 430 killed, 1,600 injured in London. 41 German aircraft shot down. 15 September, Battle of Britain Day. 56 German aircraft destroyed. 17 September, Hitler postpones Operation Sea Lion indefinitely. The final accounting of the Battle of Britain has been subject to revision as archival records have become available. The figures cited here are drawn from the Battle of Britain historical timeline, which attributes its lost data to Winston G. Ramsay's The Battle of Britain. Then and now, the most comprehensive published reconstruction of aircraft losses on both sides. The Luftwaffe's total losses across the battle were 1,018 aircraft and 2,662 airmen. The RAF's fighter command losses were higher in aircraft that were destroyed outright, but the RAF recovered a significant proportion of its pilots. British pilots who were shot down over British territory could, if they survived, be back in the air within hours or days. German pilots who were shot down over Britain faced captivity for the duration of the war. German bombers typically carried 4 to 5 crew, each representing a proportionally greater manpower loss than a single-seat British fighter pilot. Aircraft production during the battle consistently favored Britain. The total production figure for 1940 was approximately 10,000 British aircraft against 8,000 German. During the battle itself, British fighter production ran at approximately twice the German rate of replacement. The Civilian Repair Organization, a network established under Lord Beaverbrook's Ministry of Aircraft Production, developed a system of repairing damaged aircraft quickly in the field, returning fighters to service that would previously have been written off. The pilot shortage was the more serious British constraint. With aircraft production running at 300 per week, only approximately 200 pilots could be trained in the same period. Fighter Command was drawing on pilots from bombers, from training units, and from Commonwealth countries. By the end of the battle, it had consumed a large fraction of its experienced cadre, losses that would take years to replace. Luftwaffe total losses: 1,918 aircraft, 2,662 airmen. RAF Fighter Command total losses, higher in absolute aircraft, but many pilots recovered. Aircraft production 1940, Britain 910,000, Germany 8,000. Weekly RAF production 300 aircraft. Pilot training 200 per week, a critical gap. The Luftwaffe's failure to achieve air superiority over Britain is documented as resulting from several concurrent factors, no single one of which was decisive on its own. Intelligence failures. The Luftwaffe consistently overestimated its kill claims and underestimated British production and reserves. Göring's staff believed Fighter Command had fewer than 500 fighters when it had over 700 ready and hundreds more in storage. Poor targeting intelligence led to attacks on coastal and bomber command airfields rather than Fighter Command's sector stations. The radar decision, Göring's 15th August directive halting attacks on radar stations, allowed the chain-home network to remain intact throughout the battle. The RAF Museum notes directly Göring's inability to grasp the vital role radar played in British air defence enabled the RAF to retain the advantage in the air. The London shift. The switch from attacking fighter commands airfields to bombing. London on 7th of September, triggered by the accidental bombing of London and the RAF's retaliatory raid on Berlin, relieved pressure on fighter command at the precise moment when that pressure was most effective. Structural limitations. The Bf-109's range constraint, the Bf-110's inadequacy as an escort fighter, the Ju-87's vulnerability to modern fighters, and the medium bomber's limited payload combined to make the sustained destruction of a defended island nation a task the Luftwaffe was not equipped for. It had been built, as Forces News notes citing Dildy's analysis, primarily as a tactical air force designed to support ground forces, not for independent strategic air warfare. British production and the Dowding system, Britain's ability to produce and repair aircraft at a rate exceeding Germany's, combined with the Dowding system's ability to direct available fighters to interception with high efficiency, meant that the RAF's effective fighting strength remained near its initial level throughout the battle, even as both sides absorbed losses. The Battle of Britain ended in the official RAF reckoning on 31st October 1940. It had lasted 114 days. Germany did not achieve air superiority. Operation Sea Lion was postponed indefinitely on 17th of September and never revived. It was the first major German defeat of the Second World War. What decided it was not a single technology, a single man, or a single decision. It was the combination of radar and the system that integrated it, built before the war by people who understood what air defense required. Aircraft produced in sufficient quantity to replace losses. Pilots from across the Commonwealth and occupied Europe who were willing to continue fighting, and a series of German strategic errors that gave fighter command time it would not otherwise have had. The man most responsible for the victory, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding, was removed from command on 24 November 1940, a month after the battle ended, in circumstances that historians have continued to discuss. He received no victory parade, no peerage at the time, and relatively little public recognition until decades later. His ashes are buried at Westminster Abbey. If this episode has been useful, the next in the series examines the Stuka dive bomber, the sound of blitzkrieg, and how a siren became a weapon of psychological warfare. Thank you for watching.